Hi everyone, I'm Katie from Nutritionist Resource, and today I'm joined by Charlotte Turner, a registered nutritionist and member of Nutritionist Resource. Welcome Charlotte. Charlotte specialises in IBS, gut health, weight management and women's health. And today we're going to talk about poo and break down some of those stigmas that surround poo and the uncomfortable digestive issues that many people might be too embarrassed to bring up, which we shouldn't be, because we need to break down that stigma and talk about it. So we're going to be specifically focusing on irritable bowel syndrome, so that's IBS, and it actually affects 2 in 10 people in the UK. So it's really common, and it's also highly detrimental to many people's lives and the quality of their life, especially if it's left untreated. But the good news is there are a number of different approaches and interventions that lots of different healthcare professionals can recommend. And one of those is nutritional therapy, which we're going to talk about today. So Charlotte, I would love it if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Katie. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here and to help destigmatize the topic. I completely agree. So I'm Charlotte Turner. I'm a registered nutritionist regulated with the AFN and founder of Health Nutritionist Clinic. So I guess from that introduction, I specialize in gut health and IBS and also weight management and women's health. So I will do my best to kind of unpick and answer as many questions as we can.
Perfect, thank you. So I think we'll start there, and perhaps you could explain a little bit about what actually is irritable bowel syndrome. How does it present itself?
Absolutely. So IBS, or like you said, it stands for irritable bowel syndrome. And generally, to get the diagnosis of IBS, you would be diagnosed by your GP. And it's really important to get that diagnosis from the GP, because some of the symptoms that I might talk through could be masking themselves for other conditions. So first of all, always make sure you've got that diagnosis from your GP and not from Dr. Google that sometimes people do. So as the name suggests, irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, it refers to the symptoms that affect our digestive system. And then I kind of can go through the symptoms in a bit more detail as we kind of go through the talk, but primarily, yeah, it's all around the tummy area and the digestion area.
Everybody's experience, I guess, will be different because we're all individuals, but are there any common symptoms that we should look out for? And can you talk to any common causes that people might have noticed?
Absolutely. So I guess once you've got the diagnosis from your GP, the symptoms that you would have probably been presenting with would have been bloating, maybe some stomach cramps in this kind of lower abdominal area, a change in bowel habit, so potentially more constipation or more diarrhea, or a combination of both. But what's really crucial actually is that it's not just a one-off, because we all might have a bad stomach or a bit of a cramp, or potentially a one-off change in bowel habit in isolation, but it's the combination of having that over a prolonged period of time that really distinguishes IBS as a medical diagnosis. In terms of the cause, it's always the way with these types of conditions, unfortunately, but we call them multifactorial, so that means there's quite a lot of different causes. But what we do know from research is that stress, anxiety, diet, and possibly our genetics could mean that we're more predisposed to having the condition. So it's not just one thing, unfortunately, but there's certainly ways that we can overcome symptoms that you're having through a variety of different therapies.
Okay, brilliant. And are there any not so common causes that people might not be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think generally when people think about their gut, or if you can imagine you're having bloating, or you've just kind of you're spending too long on the toilet, or you're having kind of that change in bowel habit, generally people think, oh, it must be something I've eaten.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really interesting to also note that actually some of the less common, hopefully they're going to become more common, but less common causes are mental health, stress, well-being, potentially sleep as well, can all play a role in our general health and gut health in particular. So it's always not just as simple as what you might have eaten.
Okay, so that actually leads me on to my next question, which was, can IBS be connected to your mental health? So how does that actually work? How does the gut play a part in your mental health and stress?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very interesting to know that actually the gut can be linked to our mental health. And the best way that I can describe this is if we can remember the horror days of when we were kind of studying, or we had that pressure of a deadline we had to meet, or if you had to do a big talk or presentation to like a group full of people, then potentially you might have had that kind of nervous tummy, or those kind of gastric symptoms of an increase in bowel movement or stomach cramps. And that is a key example of how the brain, our emotional state, is linked to our gut. So as you can see, it's very interesting and quite a fascinating area of how those two are interlinked. And on a scientific level, there's a growing body of research that is linked to the gut and the brain, and it's bidirectional, which means it goes both ways, and it's called the gut-brain axis. So I won't go into all of the science right now, but what we know is that there's a lot of signals that potentially can interplay with if we're stressed. We might have a change in bowel habit. If our gut's not healthy, that could also influence our mental health. So it's very interlinked, and it's really a fascinating area. And what we are seeing from kind of a holistic approach is that hypnotherapy, relaxation can sometimes improve symptoms as well for individuals. So it's a very interesting area to research and to be a part of, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned just then about the gut-brain axis. So how, is there any connection between the gut microbiome? Perhaps you could first explain what that is to people watching, and explain how that might affect your IBS symptoms as well.
Absolutely. So gut microbiome, it seems like quite a complicated description, but what it basically stands for is microbiome just means a group of bacteria. So as unpleasant as that sounds, we actually have a lot of bacteria in our gut,
Yeah.
both good and bad. And what this growing body of research is looking at is actually how, if we had more good bacteria, how that could play a role in benefiting our gut health and the health of our digestive system. We do know that, as an example, if you have a diverse range of healthy and good bacteria, then that could improve your digestion. It could improve the frequency of bowel movements. So whether if you're constipated, it could make you go a little bit more often, or if you're experiencing diarrhea, it could reduce that symptom for you. So the microbiome in general is a really important area of our overall gut health. And what's really interesting from a nutrition point of view is that we can really influence our gut microbiome from kind of a balanced diet, first of all. And the reason why we say that is we get the diversity of plant grains, fruits, vegetables. They all have different ways that they can improve our bacteria, from prebiotics you might have heard of to then kind of influence the probiotic effects of the gut. So there's a whole range of ways that we can influence our gut microbiome, and I could talk about this for a long time, but I know that we're limited time. But the gut microbiome, interestingly, and I'm not doing this justice because I haven't got a PhD in this area, but the gut microbiome can in itself influence the signals, can amplify or be part of that gut-brain axis pathway, so that it's influencing how that gut-brain axis is working. So there's a body of research, definitely very interesting to see how that's going to develop, and it's a very fascinating area. So in general, one key takeaway I would say is as much as you can diversify where you're getting your balanced diet from, and probiotics, prebiotics, they can all play a role in making that as healthy as possible.
So trust your gut has never been more true at the moment. That's incredible. That's so fascinating. Thank you. Could you just quickly explain what is the difference between prebiotics and probiotics, and perhaps how we could increase those in our diet if possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So prebiotics, the easiest way to sum this up is it's the pre, so it's before the probiotics in a way. So prebiotics are in a whole range of different things such as onions and lots of different vegetables and fruits. And these prebiotics can in themselves provide the food for the good bacteria, or the some people might call them probiotics, but the prebiotics are the food or the nutrients basically to keep the good bacteria healthy. It's quite a complex thing to explain without going into too much science behind it. But if you have a balance of a diet, so if you're having your 5 fruit a day, 5 fruit and vegetables a day, then you can generally think that you're getting those prebiotic elements. And then the probiotics are basically fermented foods that are providing your gut with a source of good bacteria. So you can generally get that from natural yogurts, or some of the fancier places such as like kombuchas or kimchis or fermented foods. And as long as they go through the gut and through the stomach and the digestive system, they'll reach your gut and provide more of those beneficial, happy bacteria that we want to basically make the gut healthy. So it really is really nice to know that if you had a balanced source of all these different things in your diet, then you're making your gut as healthy as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's really useful to work with a nutritionist as well, because you get lots of personalised information that you might not get from reading on Google or something. Because everybody is unique, we do need that personalisation as well. So we just touched on food here. So I wanted to talk through the FODMAP diet, because that's been the traditional go to your doctor and they'll give you information on the FODMAP diet. So I just wondered if you could talk us through what actually the FODMAP is and how it could be helpful for someone with irritable bowel syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of people might think FODMAP diet, or Google that and see what that involves, thinking that it's just a simple diet. So before I go into the FODMAP diet itself and how it could be beneficial for IBS, it's really important to state that actually it's not the first point of call that we would ever suggest for IBS. So as we talked through, because of the multi causes of potentially the root cause of the symptoms that you might experience, from a nutritional perspective, we would generally look at what could be the most obvious things first. So crucially, you could look at this yourself before seeing a nutritionist, but we would look at kind of, are you drinking enough water? Because that can play a huge role. Do you have that balanced diet? Again, it's kind of a key word that we all need to say. And have you got enough fibre as well? Because without the fibre and the roughage, it's not surprising that things might not work properly down there. So if all of those things are in place and you're still experiencing these cramps and problems, and you really need that support and that help, then we would look at FODMAPs. And what FODMAPs are, they basically stand for, so all the letters like F, O, D, M, and P. What they stand for is a fermentable sugar.
Okay.
The reason why they stand for fermentable sugars is each type of sugar has a different chemical makeup. So that just adds to the complexity, as you can probably imagine. All these types of sugars are found in different foods. And if you were just to follow the FODMAP diet on your own, it's quite concerning from a nutrition perspective, because the list could be very long of all the foods that have these FODMAPs in. And if you were to cut them all out, I think sadly, one, you'd be miserable, because that's quite an extreme thing to do without the supervision of a nutritionist or dietitian. But two, you could then not get all your nutrients that you need. So it's really, really important to not just do this on your own, and to get a nutritionist to help and guide you through that. But the reason why FODMAP diet was developed is a lot of research has shown that actually these fermentable sugars, for some individuals, they're not digested properly, and what that causes is that excess gas that causes the cramps and the bloating potentially, and potentially it changes the amount of water that your gut might have, which then can then cause like diarrhea symptoms, etc. So what the clever body of research people that found out that these FODMAPs were causing the issues, what they found out is that generally it's a certain type of FODMAP for people, so it's not the whole list of foods, because it could be fruits, vegetables, wheat, grains. It's in a whole host of different things. So the FODMAP diet basically works with the individual to start to eliminate potentially a certain type of that fermentable sugar from a certain over a certain period of time. They note down the symptoms. It's like process of elimination basically to see what's working. And what's interesting in our clinic, we are working with a hydrogen breath test company to see actually if we can measure the hydrogen that comes out in terms of our breath, if we've not digested something properly. And if that is the case, it's a little bit simpler for that person to get the instant results and seeing, oh, FODMAP is causing that problem. And because I can imagine, going through this whole elimination plan is quite a long process, and something that we would suggest you see a nutritionist or dietitian to follow, to make sure that you're doing it safely, and they can actually help guide you in terms of what FODMAP it would be for you in terms of the symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there any general foods that you have noticed may be causing a problem?
I generally say that in the first instance, in terms of who we see coming to the clinic with IBS, there's a large proportion, I would say at least a third of people, it could be that actually it's that amalgamation of lifestyle and diet. And typically the first review is to kind of look at the regularness of what you're eating and actually what it's made up of. Because I think what we do generally see is that if people are having kind of quick convenience, more processed foods, sometimes that means they're not getting enough fibre. And sometimes with our day-to-day life at the moment, we forget to have enough water and fluid. So that's generally, we see that's the most common.
Okay.
But then after that, FODMAPs are themselves a root cause for the people that have really been struggling, that really been following a balanced, healthy diet. And some people's stomachs can, double in terms of the bloating that they can experience, and that a small amount of bloating is normal and quite healthy. It's when the people that really experience that pain and that kind of expanded stomach or kind of gut area, that in itself is a sign sometimes that it could be linked to a FODMAP or something they're not digesting effectively. And that's what we go through this kind of scientific approach of elimination through the FODMAP plan.
So you also mentioned that it was a combination that included lifestyle as well. So when somebody is having a flare-up or they've been diagnosed with IBS but they're still quite struggling, how could we practice self-care specifically in that moment, and also daily when we've perhaps have got our IBS under control as best as possible, but we still need that little bit of extra care?
Yeah, it's a really, really important question. And in general, I think we all, through this pandemic in particular, have probably noticed the importance of self-care and how we can look after ourselves a bit better. But like all things, lifestyle is always individual to the person. The main aspects of self-care, and I would say this because I'm a nutritionist, but then the main aspects are a balanced diet, plenty of water, a good night's sleep, crucially, and making that downtime where you can relax and manage your stress levels. We know that stress is very much linked to IBS. It's very much going to be a part of not just that brain gut axis in terms of that directional relationship, but also if you can imagine, I mean, when people are stressed, you might change your diet, you might have more caffeine, you might have sort of different coping mechanisms of what you might reach for, more convenience food and less fiber. So it's like this whole kind of flowchart, I guess, of like step by step how it can influence things. So I would say really think about what simple thing you can do to improve your self-care, whether it's just making sure you go out for a walk, or having more water, or not looking at your work emails past a certain time. Whatever that looks like for you, it will make a difference in terms of your overall digestion and your general health, really.
Yeah. And can certain types of medication impact IBS? Say if you're on specific medication, might not be lifelong, but for a prolonged period, can that impact the development of IBS?
It's crucially important to kind of distinguish, really, because IBS in itself is a group of symptoms. So without being a medical doctor myself, certainly it would be likely that certain medication might increase bloating, and unfortunately some medication might increase the likelihood of constipation and diarrhea. So every medication might have a list of symptoms, so it's always worth, if you are experiencing one of those symptoms, to go to your GP and just say, I'm having this symptom. Is it linked to my medication, or is it a sign of something else? So it's always worth to make sure you follow that first step in terms of seeking the right advice, because as you can imagine, bloating, changes in bowel habits, it could be a sign of something else. Hopefully it's not, but your GP will have to just rule out a few things first. So yeah, it's there's not going to be, definitely not a medication that causes IBS. It's mainly going to be a medication might produce some symptoms similar to some of the symptoms of IBS, but it is worthwhile checking that with your GP.
Yep. Great. So I just had a couple of frequently asked questions that we see a lot on the directory that I'm hoping to put to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Great. So these are specifically around food, and the number one question we get is, how is salt linked to IBS?
That is a really interesting, actually. So that's the number one searched question. So I'm finding that quite interesting, because that in itself is showing that I wonder whether people who feel like they have too much salt are getting symptoms. That's interesting from my research perspective. That's always interesting to know. What I would say is that salt in general, at a population level, we're all kind of consuming a little bit too much salt. So I don't know if people are aware, but the target for us to have as adults is about a teaspoon amount of salt a day, or less than 6 grams as an adult per day. So generally, salt in foods is generally higher in processed foods, because salt is used as a preservative to keep the food the shelf life for longer. So I wonder whether, if people are thinking it's salt, whether they're having more of the processed foods that have higher salt content, which then in itself might suggest to me that they're lower in fiber. But to answer your kind of question on salt and IBS, it's not really something that's linked from a general IBS perspective. We do know that a higher amount of salt might increase bloating. And potentially, if we have higher salt, then it basically means we're more likely to be dehydrated, so we might not have enough fluid. So that's why it's never going to be just the cause. So I would sort of come back to the have more kind of water, have a more balance and less processed foods, and more kind of vegetables, which no one ever wants to hear sometimes in terms of what might help, but that general balance will really make a difference if they think that salt is the problem.
Okay, thank you. And can buckwheat be a helpful replacement for somebody with IBS?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So buckwheat is quite a confusing name. Before I studied nutrition, I myself would have made the same mistake as well, because you think buckwheat, you think, oh, that's wheat.
Mhm.
That's a wheat source, and wheat, interestingly, is a FODMAP. Um, so people sometimes search for buckwheat and IBS just to see what the expert opinion is on that. So buckwheat is not the same as wheat, and buckwheat is not a FODMAP. So if anyone was ever worrying about that, it's not the case. Buckwheat in its composition is a really healthy grain. So it could certainly have fiber and provide you that kind of carbohydrate source on your plate. So certainly, please kind of have it as part of your diet, because it's not been linked, as far as I'm aware, to any increases in any symptoms in terms of IBS.
Great, that's really helpful for people to know in case they were getting confused with the whole wheat name, throws you off. You've touched on this already, but how about fruit and IBS? Can it be triggering to some of the symptoms you might experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the point to note with fruit, and this is why I come back to the fact that please never start this FODMAP elimination plan on your own,
Mhm.
because the last thing we want to do from a public health perspective is get people to cut out all fruit. Our main aim, our mission in life is to try and get people to eat more fruit and veg. So that's the last thing we want. But certainly certain fruits we know are higher in FODMAP content, and that means the undigestible or the fermentable sugars that are part of certain fruits. So if you are finding that through your own kind of intuition, or if you're having certain fruits and you're noticing some symptoms, then I would certainly suggest keep a food and symptom diary, and then reach out to a nutritionist or dietitian and sort of say, here's my food and symptom diary.
Mhm.
It's linked to that particular fruit, because it could be that might be the cause, but the professional would help kind of unpick that with you, and help kind of guide you on what to do next.
Okay, brilliant. That leads nicely to my final question, which was, how could working with a nutritional professional really be helpful in the management of IBS?
I think hopefully working with a nutritionist or a dietitian is generally really helpful, because we can take apart the science of what we know goes on in terms of nutrition and food intake, and what potentially how that could influence IBS in particular. But crucially, what we're here to do is help review and understand your diet, and analyze with you how that might be interplaying with the symptoms that you're experiencing. And then we're here on hand, really, through our kind of years of training, and our understanding of nutritional adequacy, to kind of guide you through recommendations in terms of how we can get to the root cause, in terms of what might be causing digestive discomfort for you. So we're here to kind of guide you professionally on terms of the step-by-steps of what that plan could look like. First general advice we normally provide is the balanced diet, the fiber, and the fluid intake. And then if those things are not working, then we would look at the FODMAP side of things, and also think about stress and what's going on in your lifestyle, because we can't always assume that it's food, and it could be linked to just your really stressful lifestyle or really stressful job. So we're here to kind of personalize the treatment plan for you, really, and help be that sounding board of what actually needs to be done, and how we can guide you through that process.
Brilliant. So it's definitely about supporting that person in a personalised way.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I certainly wouldn't want to go through any dietary changes without the support of a professional, because the worst thing we could do is cut out whole food groups, and then as a result not get the nutrients and
Yeah.
minerals that we need for a healthy lifestyle. So yeah, definitely always seek out the support of a professional.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been really great talking to you. Finally, could you just let everybody know where they could reach you, as well as your profile on Nutritionist Resource?
Absolutely. So the best place would be So we run a health nutritionist clinic, and I sort of spread my time between London, Berkshire, and Bristol. So I'm always on hand in those areas, up and down the M4 usually.
Yeah.
But if people need to reach out to me personally, like you said, Katie, I've got a profile on nutritionist resource, but also I'm on Instagram, and I've got a website, healthnutritionist.co.uk. So either one of those sources, and it will come straight through to me, and I can kind of help explain how we work and how we can help crucially get you that support, because IBS in itself is not a nice thing to live with long term, and it's nice to be able to minimize those symptoms as much as we can.
Yes, definitely. Well, great. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks so much, Katie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.